You want to take everything that you've actually achieved. It's not the failures that actually create the chaos. It's the successes. It's the successes that we keep chasing because it's constantly chasing more dopamine. So if we hit one level of success, what we do is we want to do it again. And then we want to do it again. Then we want to do it again. And so the idea behind this, the process is not to live successfully. The idea is to live in balance.
It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Alok Trivedi, or Dr. T as he's known, or Dr. Rewire. And today we are going to, if I didn't just give it away, we're going to talk about rewiring one's brain so we can rewire our life and get different results. It all comes from that important instrument between our ears. So I'm glad to talk about this. And he's coming to us today from Chicago. Welcome, Dr. T.
Hey, thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's good to have you. So why rewire our brain?
It's a great question, right? And in your world, in financial and maybe in health and relationships, all these different things, what we're trying to do is we're always trying to live a better life. But what I realized over the years is that we kind of do this I'll say the old adage of personal development is that we always want things to be better, but we've never actually created a science, a proven, reproducible science to be able to rewire something so that you can actually get what it is you want, right? A lot of times we sit and say these, affirmations, which are great. We do exercises, which is great. We do reading, which is great. You do all this stuff, but does it guarantee a process that's going to get you to help and get over whatever obstacle you're holding? And I'll tell you honestly, it just doesn't, because we know people, and you probably know people as well, thousands of people that have been doing the old methodologies but aren't getting where they want to in their life. Or maybe they got something, but they're afraid of losing their investment. All of this comes down to the way that we think, the way that we actually navigate our brain, and the process is neurochemical. It's completely neurochemical. And what it does, it stops us from getting forward in our life, doing what it is we want to.
So the way we navigate our brain, that's an interesting statement. I like that. So how do people navigate their brains differently?
Well, most people don't know how to even navigate it. Most people, What they're doing, they don't even know. Thinking is a thing. I like to say that. Thinking is a science, and not the science of psychology. Now it's interpersonal neuropsychology, right? You can now actually navigate your brain to be able to see what thoughts you're having, why you're having the thoughts you're having, what are the neurochemicals. And we now know this from scientific perspectives to be able to grow and live our life. But most people, unfortunately, don't know this. And what they do is they're constantly reactive. I'll give you an example of this to give you some context, right? When we're recording this, it's towards the end of the year. And January 1, everyone's going to set these New Year's goals and New Year's resolutions. And they're going to say, oh, you know what? Last year, I didn't actually achieve what I wanted to, so what am I going to do this year? Believe it or not, every single person will do this one thing. They will double up on what they said that they weren't going to do. They will say, I will do twice as much the following year. I don't know about you, but I did that for many years, right?
Right. Yep.
And the reason we do that is one neurochemical. It's dopamine. Because when dopamine goes up and then it crashes because we don't get what we want, it goes down twice the level of actually achieving your goals. And so you need to balance out this dopamine thing. And this is all neurochemical. We express this to people, places, things inside of ourselves, and we don't realize what we're doing is we're actually putting ourselves into a bottomless, endless pit of chaos into our life. That's why thinking is important.
So you're saying that the dopamine hit, does that come from achieving the goal or making the goal?
The dopamine hit comes from making the goal, but making it too far and too big and not achieving it makes the contrary. And the shame emotion kicks in and actually gives you double the dopamine loss on the other side. So you create...
So in other words, people beat themselves up over their lack of initiative or failures or whatever, right? And you're saying that's correct. Twice as bad.
Twice as deep. So you don't even realize you're doing it, right? You're doing it twice as deep to the level of actual growth that you actually want. So let's just take, you wanted to make $1,000, obviously, or $1 million next year, right? And you don't achieve it. Most people will sit and say, you know what? Instead of taking up 10% or 15, 20%, what they'll do is say, you know what? The following year, I'll actually do double. And it's a compensation to our actual dopamine levels. And what that does, it leads us to shame, guilt, and resentment towards ourselves.
Okay. So does it always do that? I mean, how do we know if we have this shame, guilt, and resentment? Not everybody is it how you view failure? Some people have really learned to just take failure in stride and say, hey, look, I figured out a way not to do it. but a lot of people haven't, obviously. So does everybody do this, or how do we approach this? Tell us
Everybody
how
automatically does it. Those that have actually gone through more failures and have been able to rise above it will actually realize that the failure was the lesson. They will put it together and they'll create their own strategies, their own navigational processes to be able to help them get over that. They'll be able to do that inside that. But they've navigated their own failures. That's why we all know, like, the people that are most successful are the ones who get through failure. They've overcome their failures because they navigate through that. They understand and rationalize it. They think about it and they grow beyond it. However, here's a problem with some individuals never actually do that. And what they do is they may come back and seem to be successful in society, but they constantly live with that fear of it happening again. And that's every human being deals with that. Like, that is just a neurochemical process. So someone, let's say, makes $10 million and they were in the bottom of the pit before. They're now going to create the fear of loss of that $10 million to navigate and balance out that brain.
Okay, so it seems like we've identified the problem pretty well. How do we fix it? What is the specific, how to fix that?
Well, there's several things. What we want to do is, first, you want to take everything that you've actually achieved. It's not the failures that actually create the chaos. It's the successes. It's the successes that we keep chasing because it's constantly chasing more dopamine. So if we hit one level of success, what we do is we want to do it again. And then we want to do it again. Then we want to do it again. And so the idea behind this, the process is not to live successfully. The idea is to live in balance. And let's say you hit it. Let's say, Jason, this is, let's say you get to the 2000th episode of this show. And that's a goal that you wanted. Great. What are the challenges of that? When we look at the downside of our successes, we'll actually be able to navigate and govern and make sure we keep our brain and our body in balance. It's not the failures that have to get lifted up. It's the successes that have to get brought down.
I'm just struggling with this a little bit because are you saying that we shouldn't appreciate our successes or that we over appreciate them or we overemphasize them? Is that what we're doing?
It's a great clarification. It's not that you don't want to appreciate them. Appreciation is from seeing from both sides. But when we over-index and get too happy and become too elated, too enthusiastic about them, that's when we're going to create chaos in our system, in our body, to recreate balance. So when we get too elated, we're going to bring the opposite side to ourselves, and the whole nervous system is going to crash on the other side. So what we've got to do is take our successes, but take them and take them from a perspective of balance in that, okay, this high success is great. It's something I've wanted to achieve. It's also got its challenges that you've achieved it. There are the downsides of those. There are the upsides of the failures, but nobody talks about the downsides of the challenges and the successes, We talk about one because we get addicted to the idea of always achieving, always successful. Because the more we try and achieve, the more we constantly want to chase the idea of more success versus truly being fulfilled. Health and fulfillment come from a state of when we're actually governed and have the body in a state of balance. That's what I'm talking about here.
Okay, so we get on this treadmill and we keep chasing success. That's pretty elusive because no matter what you achieve, there's always someone achieving more. The mountain always gets bigger. You look at in the money genre, look at Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, right? Elon's very ahead now, but who knows if that'll stay that way.
It depends on what's going to happen tomorrow in the market. Who knows, right?
Right, yeah. So chasing is part of the problem then.
It is. And the reason we chase is because we're constantly looking for the next hit of dopamine.
Right.
Which is why I wrote the book, Chasing Success, because it's constantly looking for that next hit of dopamine. And that becomes a state of unfulfillment, right?
Yeah.
I like to say that success is one thing and fulfillment is another thing. But when you actually can have success and fulfillment together, then that's truly living a state of gratitude. And most people are chasing success from the outside, chasing fulfillment from the inside, but realize that success and fulfillment have to happen from the outside and inside together. That's called wealth, true wealth. And that's what I've been able to help people with and gain that true wealth inside of them.
Okay, so let's talk about this dopamine response just for a moment. The social media companies have been criticized, rightly so, for trapping people into these dopamine cycles, I guess I'll call it, for lack of a better word. What they're doing is absolutely disgusting. It's awful. But look, Dopamine is there for a reason. The video gamers and the social media just so addictive, right? And same with gambling and casinos, and what they do is awful. What are we trying to do though? Is kind of even that out? I mean, what is the way to handle that? Because we all go after this stuff. It's a reaction, and we do it more because it feels good, right? And this is even true with something that seems like it's good and it's not good in excess, which is exercise, for example. Even exercise can be quite negative, actually, lead to oxidative stress and a whole bunch of problems, joint problems and so forth years later. But there's a dopamine hit in that too, right? And people become addicted to it. So is it just a matter of balance? And if so, how do we know where the balance point is?
It's a great question. That's exactly what it is. Social media, right? TikTok, you go on TikTok, you're addicted. You don't even realize you're scrolling and through, right? Facebook, you're scrolling. That's right, but that's what it is. And we constantly are being bombarded by over dopamine. And dopamine is necessary. You need it for life, for food, for reproduction, for growth. It's needed. But it's the over index of dopamine that causes our chaos, right? And what I mean by that is this, is right, say exercise. Exercise, it's the endorphins that pull us more than it is actually the dopamine. The dopamine is the chase to actually get the endorphin. But the endorphin is what makes us high from the exercise. Now, at the same token, if we're looking at this in society, now we're talking about medical here in health in that capacity, but let's take this now to a business, right? Like someone's trying to do a real estate deal. If they're looking always for the next hit, to be the richest, to be the biggest, to be the baddest, that's a dopamine chasing mechanism. And no matter how big the house, no matter how big the portfolio, those things are going to fall apart. There's always going to be something that's bigger. Someone's always bigger and better at what you do. Now, if we grow our net worth and our income and our potential by 10% at a time, our brain can actually navigate this. Our brain can navigate a 10% fluctuation without creating massive index of highs and lows in our life. And so you're right, we want to govern that out and balance that out. How do we do that? First thing we do is we have to first look at and regulate that 10% mechanism. So we're not over-indexing and creating neurologic imbalance in our system.
How do we regulate it?
You control it. You ask yourself, instead of looking for success from the outside, you sit and say, let's say $1 million. Let's say you hit $1 million. Instead of saying next year I'm going to do 2, which is a very large gap, you take it, I'll go 1.1. Take a 10% growth and then take it to 1.21. But if we gradually look at this over the years and you will compound that, you will actually grow much further than just trying to go high and low and high and low. I have athletes, professional athletes that work with me, and they've been in the World Series, and everyone gets super extremely elated afterwards, and then they crash after the championship. What do we have to do? We have to rewire that so that they can come back and realize that that imbalance is what's creating what's called a root experience in your system. And that root experience is constantly navigating and governing the experiences of your body because it's been out of balance for all these years. And what we do is that rewire that so that you can actually learn to rewire that, therefore rewire your life, your health, your wealth, and your relationships because of it.
Well, tell us more about a root experience. You're making me think of a few things, by the way, and I just don't want to forget them, so I'll mention them now. You're making me think of the concept of the person who peaks too soon, like in high school. The quarterback, the hottest cheerleader, the most popular, the homecoming queen, whatever, right? That kind of thing. But also lottery winners or people that have sudden success in life. And maybe it was success due to their own efforts, but it was sort of like an imbalanced amount of success, a celebrity, but certainly just people in business that aren't even celebrities that just have a thing. And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Napoleon. The most dangerous moment comes with victory.
Yep.
I have seen that play out so many times in life where people are victorious and then they just crash afterwards. 100%. They just ruin their life in some way. So the root, that was the question though.
That's exactly right though, but you're right on, Jason. You're dead on with it, right? So like I have clients who hit their peak with the high school. I have valedictorians that come to me all the time. They're super intelligent people, super intelligent individuals, but they peak at that point. And then from there forward, now their system is the nervous system. The blueprint of their nervous system is now trying to chase that same high. And they can't get it. And they crash after that. The high school cheerleader, the high school football player, right? the peak is so high, they peak too soon. I like to say I'm not ready to peak until the day before I die, because that means I'm constantly growing. But every individual that is constantly looking or wins too early, too soon, they crash. I'm a perfect example of that in my business. In my business career, I started off in practice, and I built one of the biggest practices in the country. We were seeing over 1,250 patient visits a week, and I was a 26-year-old kid making a couple $1 million a year. Didn't know, well, it was a lot of money for me at that point in time. What did I do right after? I found my way on the other side, and I kept on chasing this idea of success. And this is why I dug deep into this, is because I had to rewire and navigate my own brain around this. Because if I didn't, I kept on realizing, I kept on going high, but then crashing, kept on going high and crashing. And probably like much of your audience, Jason, like they're used to succeeding. They're used to winning. They can get what they want because they're smart people. But how do you navigate the emotional side of that? How do you navigate the internal psychology? How do you navigate the internal system? That is what it is. So all these major successes are root experiences that are actually causing you for more chaos in your life. You can have positive root experiences. You can also have negative root experiences. I'll give you some examples of negative root experiences. Bankruptcies, divorces, losing a job, business partner ordeals. These are negative ones. That's common. Everyone knows about that stuff. But where did those come from? They came from the positive ones, not the negative ones.
So what are some positive root experiences then?
Just like we were saying, being a valedictorian.
Okay.
Right? Or maybe hitting, a certain goal that you wanted. Maybe building the biggest portfolio.
Sure. Okay.
That type of thing.
But if we're going to set goals and try to achieve something big, right? The whole point is to have positive root experiences. So what's wrong with that? Let me just frame that question a little better for you. It's sort of an issue of relativity, maybe, right?
Sure.
Because what is a big achievement for, and we'll just take money because money's easy to quantify. And it's not the only thing. Certainly there are more important things in life than money, but it is a tool and it's easy to count. Okay. Other things aren't so quantifiable. You take a person that makes $40,000 a year, right? And that's not much money in today's world. And you take that person and they've got a goal to increase their income to $60,000 a year, right? Sure. And, that's 50% increase. That's a pretty big number. But then you take someone who's, worth $100 million and they want to be worth $150 million. Same percentages, but the mindset and the context from which each of those people operate is quite different. So is it an issue of relativity? Like if we make our root experience bigger, then it seems like we're more capable of achieving bigger. Is it no? Or
it is an issue of relativity. It's an issue of governance, is what it comes down to. How do you govern your brain? How do you navigate it? If the person who made the 60,000 gets super excited and super elated, like, oh my God, I made 60,000, and they raise a dopamine spike on it, then chances are they're going to have some issues on the back end of that. The person who made 150 million, if they didn't, and they just realize, okay, it's just a number, it's just money, and they've got it organized that they're not too elated about it, then they'll continue to grow. The root experience comes in when you become imbalanced with whatever it is you did. When you become imbalanced with the successes or the failures, either of these will create a place where you will now have to navigate through a cycle of trying to get back to balance. So it is relativity, and it's based on the individual, right? You're super successful. Your number of relativity is different than someone who may not be as let's take financially liquid as you, financially successful as you. But at some point, whatever deal you're at, if you sit and say, maybe it's $1 billion for you, but that number stretches your consciousness, big goals will then create big chaos. Strategic goals will create a system for you to actually achieve it. That's the difference.
Okay, I like that. So how do we know if our goal is a big goal that's going to create chaos or a strategic goal that's going to be, manageable? I've always kind of thought of myself in my own career and financial life as an incrementalist. And, I just kind of plod along and do my thing, and I keep growing my wealth, and, it works pretty well, I must say.
That's the secret.
But, I admit I'm human. Listen, I get a little envious of sometimes these people that come out of the woodwork, and I'm like, where did that guy come from? And now he's like this big deal, we're like, it's got all this money. A lot of those are false stories too. We have to adjust for exaggeration.
That's exactly right. Yeah. You're completely right? Like if you're an incrementalist, as you're saying, you will lead a longer, healthier, more fruitful life than the person that comes in out of nowhere and then crashes out of nowhere. Because in your industry and mine, in my industry, there are people that have come out of nowhere, but they can't sustain it, right? And it's the same way in the body. The longevity factors, there's two things we need to focus on for longevity, is regulation of dopamine and regulation of glucose. These two things will determine
or
the
really
longevity of
insulin,
your,
right? The insulin response.
it's the
Yeah,
insulin
right.
response inside of
Yeah,
that. But those
yeah.
two things are dependent for longevity of a human being. If I take that to the same life cycle in business, it's the same thing. You have to be able to navigate the dopamine and the insulin response in business because they're connected.
Mm-hmm.
And if we take that, and then we sit and say, okay, long term, what's going to happen? But the short term, our society is so dopamine fixed. It says, look at this person. They did all the success out of nowhere, and it becomes a rags to riches story that we all love inside of it. But that long term is not healthy.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so the question was, how do we know if our goal is strategic or
Yeah,
it's going to create chaos? And I just want to make sure people catch that. I want to catch it myself. So, if can you elaborate on that?
absolutely. I'd say do two things. First, make sure you have the downside of the goal listed out. So you know exactly what are the challenges that you're going to actually have to go through to get this goal. Because if you can't see that goal objectively, then it is a fantasy. So objectively, can you sit and say all the negative things that you're going to go through, all the downsides of achieving this goal? If you can look at that, number one, you know psychologically, from the perceptive standpoint, it's now objectively balanced. Now, do you have a true strategy to actually achieve it? Can you put the steps in place incrementally, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, to get what it is you want? That's a strategy. That is a plan, a system. However, in my experience, most people live their life in a fantasy, chasing the next dopamine, not putting a strategy together. I'll give you an example, like exercise. It's a great example of this, right? And I'm just as guilty, right, as maybe someone else. But it's like you start lifting weights, you start training, you want to lose all that weight overnight. You're like, oh, I want to lose 15 pounds. I want to take a month. And the marketing is great. Lose 20 pounds in 60 days, in 30 days. And all you got to do is take this one pill. And that's all you have to do. And you know and I know, Jason, that's not reality. Is that it takes work, it takes effort, it takes a strategy to get there. You have to get your diet right, your carbs right, all these factors to make sure, and your exercise right, and muscle training right, to be able to get you there. That's what we're looking for, is a true strategy around it.
Right. You know what I think happens there? It's interesting that you say that. When you can lay out the steps and it's a strategy, that gives people incremental small dopamine hits along the way.
Correct.
And then that, number one, it's character building, but number two, because people kind of earn their stripes, if you will, right, along the way. Then that big success at the end, if the goal is achieved, it doesn't seem like that big a deal. It's like it's a natural consequence of just following these steps, following the strategy, and making it happen. So it's more real and more expected at the end of that journey to that goal. Is that a way to make the dopamine more manageable rather than being like a big high and an ugly crash?
Correct.
Because you get those hits along the way by achieving this, that, and the other thing, all the incremental steps?
Each incremental step along the path is a 10% spike, and your body can manage that. And you'll grow by that 10% spike. Your body can manage, your brain can manage that. And you're exactly right? You're putting a piece, I think you naturally probably do this on your own, which says why you're successful. However, most people don't get that. But yes, you want to set it where it's a strategy, and you say, okay, week one, if I do this, this is my success point. Then week two, I'm going to hit this as my success point. Week three, and you're constantly growing, a little bit at a time, right? We build belief a little bit at a time, and that's putting one step in front of the other, one neurologic or one dopamine hit after another. That's how we build belief. This is a psychology of building belief around it, but it's done in this system. I am not a fan of setting big goals because I have seen more people crash and burn off of big goals than actually setting a strategy that they can actually achieve something.
Is it fair to say with the goal that it should be just out of reach but not out of sight? Would that be a good way to look at it?
I think that's fair as long as you can have a strategy behind it. But if it's out of sight and it's so big that it scares you, right? Like we've heard these things before from personal development, that set a goal so big that it scares you. If it scares you, you're never going to actually move towards it. Like the brain doesn't work that way. If you're afraid of it, then you're never going to actually move towards it. You're not, and so like that doesn't make sense in any capacity. You've got to set it where you can see it. You can see the tangible path that you can take towards getting it. And when you can see that path, then you'll actually take action. Our brain is designed to take action on what it is we see in front of us.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I love income property as an investment. It's not like a big hit on some crypto thing that's here and then gone, or some speculative deal. It's very incremental. And the returns are great. The safety and the prudence of it is just great. It's historically proven for hundreds, if not thousands of years, quite literally thousands. And it's very incremental like that. So I think that's good. It reminds me of that quote by Einstein, who said, "Compounding interest is the eighth wonder of the world."
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share with the audience? Questions I didn't ask you, something we didn't talk about, to just wrap it up for us?
I would just say that, we talked a lot about the brain and dopamine, but the emotions that follow it are essential to follow. If you become too prideful, then you realize that that's a state of high in dopamine. If you become too shameful or resentful, it's also mechanisms and feedback to let you know that you were too high in dopamine and now you're feeling the effects of it. So just realize emotions are the feedback that let you navigate the neurology of the body.
That is great. So too much pride goeth before the fall, as the saying goes, right?
Right.
Too much pride, you're riding on too much dopamine, okay? And on the other side of it, if you have a lot of shame and guilt, then the dopamine hit was too high. Is that
correct?
The way you look at that? Oh, that's really good.
Correct.
I like it. Yeah.
We didn't get into the emotions and all that. We could do, we could talk about that for hours on end.
Yeah. Well, give us a snippet of it, if you would, and then give out your website.
Yeah, absolutely. I would sit and say that I like to say, whatever you resent, you'll resist. So if you have any resentment built in your body and built in your brain from a past root experience, you're going to resist it in the future. If you have guilt or shame towards something, you're going to give away your wealth towards whatever you have guilt or shame towards. And those two mechanisms really run the financial mechanism and as we were talking about here, in getting wealthy from the financial aspect. Those two emotions govern it, but they all stem from being too prideful earlier at some point. Pride, as you said, is before the fall, right? And so either of these are mechanisms to give us feedback. If you want to learn more, you just go to drrewire.com. Again, that's drrewire.com. You'll learn more about different things and more content around this stuff. But this has been truly a delight, and I appreciate this, Jason.
Yeah, my pleasure. And you've got a book coming out too, right?
We do. It's working on it. I don't know exact dates, but it'll be Rewire Your Life. It's coming out hopefully by the summer. That's my plan.
Good stuff. Well, I expect you to take a very incremental and strategic approach to finishing book.
That's right. That's
Good stuff. Dr. T, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jason.